fmtraining.tv. My name is Margaret. I'll be your broadcast broadcast engineer. My brain totally spaced and I forgot the word. It's gonna be one of those days.
It feels
I
like Friday.
it totally feels like Friday. Somehow like my calendar is lying to me and telling me it's a Thursday, but it's full of crap. Um Hi everybody, good to see you all. Hi Christian, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Margaret. It's nice to be with you.
Yeah, we haven't hung out since the 30-day thing, I think. So it's awesome to have you on the stream. Real quick, let's talk about our live stream training schedule. We do talk about the wonderful FileMaker platform, uh, 5 days out of the week. So today we're doing ChatGPT Add-on with Kristian Olsen. Real quick, if you'd like to support the channel, we greatly appreciate it. Ba, 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 ba. One of these puppies. Basically, our streams are awesome. We love having them. We love talking to and interacting with the community. It's a big part of why we do this. However, every once in a while I get people going like, hey, I just started FileMaker. How? I don't understand. Um, this video subscription is for you. Basically, this walks you through the very basics of understanding FileMaker, becoming a pretty competent intermediate level developer from like, what is FileMaker? What is a database? What do you mean it stores data? I don't understand, to much more complicated, like how do I get my reports and invoices to work? Because when I print it, it looks terrible. All that jazz. We talk about all that. It's over 100+ hours. It's very edited. There's short and concise videos. So if you like that, I suggest you go do that. People who have bought it, thank you very much. The support is greatly appreciated. So, hi Christian. Do you want to like talk briefly about like what we're doing today? Like what's the goal here? What's the vibe? What are we accomplishing?
Um, well, it's no, anyone who's familiar with me knows that I've got another add-on for Wolfpack. So I think according to Margaret, we're on X15.
We are.
And so recently I've had some clients that have finally had use cases for doing ChatGPT integrations. I have been wanting to work with AI for a while. But I really haven't had any clients, excuse me while I fix my backpack or my sweatshirt. I haven't
You're
had any
good.
clients that had actual use cases, or my clients that do, they're not our top priority right now. I do expect us to loop back on it. But I had a client with a really cool situation where they've got a FileMaker database that helps their clients to manage farms. And the people that go on and fill out the forms, they frequently have questions. And so they have a tech support team. And the same questions, as you might imagine, start to get asked over and over again. Most of it is how to use the database. And he thought, you know what might be great for this is let's see if we can get ChatGPT involved. And in fact, OpenAI and most of the other AI companies are creating these agents. Anyone who's kind of in the AI realm is probably familiar with this. Agentic is starting to become this like buzzword going around. And so, yeah, we created an agent, and fortunately, he had lots of data of the question and answer over the years that we could load up into the system to pre-train it. And people could log on and they could start asking the AI some questions. And it's been working great. The client, to use his own words, it exceeded his expectations quite a bit. And so I can talk to you about some of the strategies and things that I've learned related to that. But what I thought would at least be neat is most of you out there have probably gone on and used ChatGPT, where you ask something and it gives you an answer back. And so the add-on I have is extremely simple. It's the chat completion. So you can send a question over to OpenAI and it will complete that. In this specific integration, it doesn't create threads, it doesn't create agents, it doesn't do any of the fancy stuff. That means that it doesn't have the context of your conversation, but it can still do the completion. And it also gives you kind of a model of how this works and just gives you a chance to experiment this in FileMaker. And it's really easy to add with a caveat. Unfortunately, it's not 100% free. I'm giving you what I built for free, but you will need to create an OpenAI account, and you're going to have to load some amount of money up. Now, one of the conversations I've had with other engineers, Claris, and clients is like, what does it cost to use this AI? I don't know about anybody out there. It's weird because I can't see you guys like gauge the audience, but this has always been a really big question for me because it's like, well, we can add this really awesome tool, but is it going to cost $1 million? Is it going to cost $1? Like, where are we at on it? And I can tell you, at least for my one client so far, and I almost don't believe this, but that's what the data shows us. He's been using it for a couple months now, and their cost is a couple bucks. And again, I just can't believe that's true. I don't know if that's on top of their monthly. He didn't seem to believe that it was. But that I think has been really optimistic for me to see because listening to a lot of the developers at Engage and whatnot, everyone talks about the fact that these services are quite expensive. Now, if I have time, I'll talk to you guys about some of the strategies that I've learned about, and I can see how that could cause costs to explode.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing is this technology is so cool and so easy to use that I could see why the costs go up because you can start using it for like everything. And before the stream started, Margaret and I were talking, and I mean this emphatically. Of all the APIs I've ever done, OpenAI's is the best. And I'm not here to try to sell OpenAI stock or products, but I was doing two other APIs at the same time as this, and hands down, it's the best one I've ever used. And so if you want, we can definitely look at the dashboard, talk about what it looks like on the back. And there's a lot of places we can go with this. And I'll try to show you guys some of the wormholes to dive down, engage you guys on it. Because the
Yes.
demo that I'm going to show you guys is really quick. I'm talking a lot right now because if I showed you the demo, it would be done already. Um,
I
so
do have a question. Someone is asking what an agenic is.
So agenic, I think, is I'm going to explain this poorly, but there are these agents. Think of like so. ChatGPT right now, you go on there, you put a prompt in, it takes your prompt, and then it tries to guess the answer and
Mm-hmm.
spit it back out at you. Think of an agent almost like you've made now, I guess, a robot for a lack of a better word, and it can now be trained. In fact, they have three tools that you can configure it with. One of them that my client is using is you can upload your own data and it can query that data and answer from it. So my client uses Slack as an example, and they had all their question and answers for several years in JSON, and we imported that in there. And so the agent is querying through those things to then answer. It can also write code. You can also create functions. The example that OpenAI gives is that you can say, hey, I need you to go find the weather. And these are things that it can perform in addition to the completion. So agentic is where you start to create this environment of using agents to solve problems. Some of you out there may be more familiar with AI. By all means, correct me on my explanation of it. And
Mm-hmm.
this is where, and I can dive into it more later because I think this stuff is really fascinating. But I'll go ahead and give you guys this quick example on where I think the agentic kind of thing goes versus like just chat completions. When
Mm-hmm.
I first got into learning how to use AI, it was all about forming your prompt. And any of you who've gone on the chat GPT, maybe you've learned you get a better response when you say, hey, I want you to pretend that you're a Michelin star chef with 2 years of experience working in Italy. And I now want you to make this recipe. You get a different answer when you do that. Hey, here are the ingredients that I want you to put in this recipe. Oh, I want it to be this long. And by the way, I asked you a question like this previously, and here's the answer. And the more that you do in that prompting, the better the answer it gives you. But every time you're having to upload the data fresh. Whereas with the agent, it can actually store all of that information. And so for my client, the agent was so good we didn't have to do this. But one of the directions we were thinking about going was not using one agent, but having three or more. And the idea being this, you ask the first agent your question, and the user is probably not going to be good at making a prompt. So that agent receives the question and then processes it, and its only skill is writing prompts. And so it would write the prompt and it would send that to the answerer. And that agent would then get the prompt, answer the question, and then spit it out to the third agent, and its job is a gatekeeper to make sure nonsense doesn't go out and that the answer that it's giving is also spruced up and cleaned up. Now, again, in this use case, the middle agent, the answer was so good, we didn't need the others. But so many people say this gatekeeper one is one that you really should have. And so that's where you get into this, as I understand it, this agenic model where you're having multiple agents doing multiple tasks. In fact, for complicated tasks, so this is where it's really kind of blows my mind a little bit. I'm not using this, so this is more of a hypothetical, but you have a large problem to solve. So you actually ask multiple agents the question or parts of it, and they solve it in parallel. And then at the other end, you have an agent to kind of construct those answers and put it out. And so these are the things that different people are exploring. Many of whom are probably a lot more bright and experienced than I am about it. But did that help answer that person's question a little bit? I know I carried on there for quite a bit.
I think so. Basically, it sounds like, because I'm not as up to date with the AI stuff as I should be, but basically, it sounds like you're personalizing your own assistant.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly. And for my client, we gave it a name. You can give it. It can know. I don't want to say a personality, but we definitely gave it a name and kind of you can give it a description. There's so many layers to this that it's really quite interesting. Any other questions so far?
Uh, Not at the moment. So
Beautiful, no worries. So let's do this then. I'll go ahead and share my screen. How's my screen look, Margaret? Usually we test beforehand,
it
but
looks good. Yes, it looks a good size. I can see
okay.
it. We're
It's
good.
miserable. And I
Yeah, I
put
know, I
on
know.
I put on the not dark mode for everybody because I love you guys. All right, so for anyone that's new, Wolfpack is kind of like an iTunes for add-ons. It comes with a bunch of add-ons. The idea is that this is where you could go make your own add-ons, but more importantly, manage them. We've got a bunch of videos on that. You can go back and see them. A lot of you probably have seen this or heard me talk about it. Looks like we're up to like 49 of them here. I got some others to update. And so if we go in here, and you can download this from our website right now. So if you go to where the starting point marketplace is, I think it's also fmwolfpack.com. You can download this. This is available at this moment. And so we've got this ChatGPT completion, and you would go ahead and click on this, and you would install it. It would install it in on that instance of FileMaker, and it's going to quit FileMaker. So you got to reopen it. And then it's got a pre-flight step-by-step instructions on how to set it up. So let me bring over a copy of Starting Point, and I might need to open a different version of FileMaker. We'll see here in just a moment. So let's go ahead and hit the plus on here, and yeah, that's what I thought. So unlike you guys, I have too many copies of FileMaker opened or installed, and so I need to go into the right one.
You got to figure out the right one. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
relatable.
This is not something that most of you guys probably have one copy of FileMaker installed. You will install the add-on, and you won't be dealing with the nonsense that I do. All right, so I just have a copy of Starting Point here. Nothing all that spectacular. I mean, it is a starting point. I've even heard a rumor that a new version might be coming out. So we're going to go
What?
over here and in layout mode, I didn't say anyone's supposed to. So over here in layout mode, there's a panel for add-ons, and I'm going to go ahead and click the plus on here. And there is our ChatGPT. And so it's got some information over here. It's got a preview. None of that really matters all that much. We're going to go and say choose. And if you got a hosted file, this might take a moment, but you can see it's pretty darn fast on a local file. So now, for those who are not familiar with the add-ons, I'll go through this, but I don't want to go into detail because we've got videos on this. But if I go into the relationship graph, it went ahead and added. Let's move QuickBooks out of the way. It went ahead and added this stuff. It didn't bring over my sticky notes. I don't know why they stopped doing that. Doesn't matter though. So this is the add-on right here. These three TOs. And then if we go to the relationship graph over here, we should have dash. And then we should have a log file as well. So those all came over. Tables, records, fields, all that fun stuff. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of there. It also brought over some scripts. So if we close this up and scroll to the bottom, we've got a section here for ChatGPT. So here are our scripts that I'll go through with you. This one is probably unnecessary. It's just when it's like a standalone file, but these ones are really useful. We'll go through these. Let me show you how it all works, then we can dive into it and I can answer any specific questions. And then the other thing that it does, valueless custom functions, it brings it all over. So if you guys aren't familiar with the add-ons, I really think it's one of the most utilized or discussed areas of FileMaker. All of us, as we get experience, have a situation where we want to move code from one place to another, a demo file, what have you. And add-ons are really the most efficient way to do this. And it's unfortunate that not a lot of people are taking advantage of that. But we're going to go and drag that on there. So now when I drag this on here, all of the stuff is already there. I'm just putting that instance of it on this layout. The other thing that I forgot to show you guys is this also did bring over some layouts. These were there before I drug it on. As soon as you install all that stuff there, in fact, check this out. If I right click on this and uninstall the add-on, the button's gone, the layouts, I won't go to manage, all that stuff gets removed from the database. Okay?
Vanished. Yep.
Boom, gone. So you can click on this, you can reinstall this. I'm definitely not burning time because it's a really fast demo. Let's go and drag this on screen. So we got our button there now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit browse mode. And so all this is going to do is this is going to open up a card for us. Now, over here in the menu, really glad our key wasn't displayed. I've got the base URL for OpenAI. This should just come with the add-on. You shouldn't have to change it in the version number. At some point, this might theoretically change. I'm gonna take this off screen, and I'm going to, or I'm just gonna open it in another window. While we love you guys, we're not gonna give you RCC's OpenAI key. I know. I'm sorry.
I can't believe this. How dare you?
I'm also going to conceal the box because I'm like, I don't normally have to share things that I'm not allowed to show. And there we go. So I've got my key in there, and I'm gonna. What's something you've been curious to know about, Margaret? This is always the hard part. What's a question? You want a poem? You want a short story?
What is George Eliot's most popular book?
Watch it like not work now. George Eliot's most popular book is generally considered to be The Middlemarch, published in 1871 to 72. Does that sound about right, Margaret?
Yeah, that is. So the first thing that popped into my head.
Are you familiar with FileMaker? How? What function would I use to write recursively? I'm curious if we'll get that answer right. Reclusively? I broke it. In programming, I should have been more specific. Because remember, this specific instance doesn't have the context of the conversation.
Yeah, it doesn't realize that you haven't told it. We're only in FileMaker. Only give me FileMaker responses.
Within FileMaker. And this also speaks to, I don't know, I'm sure that some of the people in here are pretty familiar with AI and others maybe haven't used it at all. The more detail that you give in the prompt, the better the answer that you get. In FileMaker, you don't have a built-in recursive function like you do in other programming. Oh, that's fun. The while function is recursive. Within file is the while function in FileMaker
recursive.
Now I'm just over here like curious what this thing actually knows.
Yeah, now we're testing it. Like, what you got cooking in there?
Okay. Oh, gives me some more info here. So the other reason I kind of wanted to show this here, I mentioned that I've been really interested in the AI, but I haven't had any clients that have needed it. So I've used it in my own personal life. The example of like the chef with the experience in terms of Michelin star, that's a real scenario. When ChatGPT first came out, I made a FileMaker file that made prompts to help us write recipes for dinner as a way of experimenting with how to use this. Outside of just fun stuff like that, I use it pretty regularly to help me solve problems. Specifically in some of the languages that I'm not as experienced with as I'm FileMaker. Examples of this are SQL, JavaScript. And so if I have a web viewer and like one of the buttons isn't doing something I want to change the color or move it. Sometimes it's a lot of work for me given my own level of experience with JavaScript. So I'll upload it into a ChatGPT or an AI model and say, hey, I want to do this with it. Can you show me what I'm supposed to do? And it's really great for this. So for those of you who are still learning, it's great to go in and answer some questions with you. So if anyone has anything they want me to put in here, effectively, you put your message in here, you get a response. And one of the things you guys may be noticing is this box is really not the most ideal for it. So this is a free demo. You know, you get what you pay for. What we've done with my client and what I would recommend others do is make a web viewer, because you're going to have a conversation chain. If you think about like your messages app, you know, there's going to be this flowing thread. Some messages are one line, some are going to be a lot longer. And really, portals are just not ideal for this. And so JavaScript has a number of libraries. You could write something yourself to basically make those text boxes that are going to be dynamic for it. So you're not have to like click into something and see what's there. I was going to possibly try to show that today, but I don't know that that file is quite in a condition that I can share it. And I can't show my clients. But that's one of the tidbits that I wanted to give you there. If you're not familiar with what's going on here, I won't get deep into the vectoring and how it stores everything there, but the simplest explanation that many have probably heard that I like is that the AI model is effectively trying to guess the next word in this. It's more complicated than that, but as you put that in, that's what it's doing here. Because this is just the chat completion and it doesn't have the thread, you do lose some of the value of being able to like talk more conversationally, because I need to make sure all the data is in there. Any questions so far, Margaret? I want to just make sure I go slowly on that.
Yes. Can you send an image to ChatGPT? Let's say like a radiograph.
Not in this demo, but ChatGPT does allow you to upload images now, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, this is really quite interesting. So to use my client as again as a use case,
Hmm.
they've got 6 or so screens that this tech support agent is answering from. And so we have the data, the question and answer for it to query to get answers from, but contextually knowing what screen it's on would be really helpful. So I thought I was really sneaky. I know how to go into a layout and extract the XML, and we uploaded that to tell ChatGPT, hey, this is the layout. And while it gave it a lot of structural schema data, it was less helpful than a secondary test that my client actually did, which is he took a picture, like a screenshot of the layout, and uploaded that to give it context. And it was remarkably skilled in looking at that image and having context. In fact, Ronnie from Claris, I brought this example up to him, and he said, you know what you could do with that, especially if you have either the image or the XML, is you could identify where their cursor is on the screen, and you could tell them where to move it and where to click. Like you could get that detailed. I know it's a lot longer than the answer the person asked. So yes, you can upload images, just not into this demo. I think that's one of the newer things that ChatGPT has done. In terms of doing it even with this integration overall, it would probably need some significant modifications, because we're using the insert from URL, so we're just sending text. So we'd either have to turn the image into base 64, or my guess is, without double checking it, we'd probably need to do some JavaScript to send it. But I don't know the answer off the top of my head, other than yes, from the ChatGPT side, you can. From the FileMaker side, there would be some heavy lifting to get that working. So is that helpful?
Uh, yes, I think so. Yeah, they said yes. Uh,
Beautiful.
Another question I didn't see. Can you change the model and does it update to the latest models, or do you have to do that manually?
Great question. So not in this file, no, you don't get to choose it or build an agent. What you can do is, let's go look at the scripts a little bit. Okay. So for what I did for my client, we basically have a dashboard, and we can manage it in a high level of detail. This is just to get people's feet kind of wet a little bit. And so if we go over here to the chat completion, it's been a while since I really wrote this, but here we go. So the model can be passed as a parameter. If we don't pass a model, it's going to use this default model. So we look to see like, hey, what this is saying is like, is there a parameter that looks for model? If not, use the default model. Otherwise, do use that. So if we hit cancel here and we go up, here's our default model. So you could just change this line of code altogether and put what you want in there. or you can come over here and change it. And so the two models that we were most experimenting with was the GPT-4o Mini and then the GPT-4o. I think they may even just released a new one. And I do want to talk about this a little bit. So when I was experimenting with this with my client, you'll notice it says good for testing, low cost, and this says high intelligence flagship model. So I started off with the Mini because it's low cost, and we just wanted to see what was effective and what wasn't. What I've since come to learn, and again, I'm not the expert on this, is that this Mini model is a lot better at reasoning versus problem solving. And I don't want to misspeak on that. But what I can tell you in terms of a use case was for answering questions for a user and querying the data. To my surprise, the Mini has been more better at it than the flagship model. And in the literature that I have read, it's because this Mini is better at reasoning, and this is a new area that they're really starting to explore. So OpenAI emails me all the time, and I'm behind on some of my reading, but this is where you could come in and put in whatever model you want. Or if you're experimenting with this, you could just delete this and literally just come over here. I'm not going to save this. But you could just do GPT-4o, and then that's your model. So again, it doesn't have a lot of the configuration from the FileMaker side, but you absolutely can change it. Sorry, no, I'm always for verbose answers. Is that helpful or follow up or anything on that?
Yes. Use the 4.1 mini. It's amazing. Even the 4.1 nano is amazing, which is almost free.
Oh, I haven't seen the Nano. So on that point, let's do this for a second. I want to open up. So this is their documentation on how to use the API. And for those of you who are new to APIs, this is actually a great one to learn on. So believe it or not, yeah, I think that you hear AI and it's like, oh, this, I really got, I mean, I
It's
guess the
big,
only thing,
scary. Yeah.
yeah, I guess the only easier one I used was like Zippopotamus. That's what I used to train juniors on. That's like it gives you a zip code or the city based on the zip code. That one technically might have been easier, but this one maybe very well is. And I'll show you how my script works if you want to go in there experiment with it. What I really like about their documentation is so what we're using right now, the endpoint, the function or feature, if you will, is this create chat completion. Okay. And so you need to pass some parameters. And so that last user who's familiar with this, he's like, hey, how can you configure the model? That's what he's asking about. And you can see if we click over here, there's a whole list of models. So there's GPT-4.1, O4 Mini, O3. They've got a whole bunch in here. I'm curious now to read about this Nano later when I get off. But we go back. Here are our different options we pass. So we've got a message, the model, audio, frequency penalty. I'm not sure what that one is off the top of my head. Function call, function. Like these are just all of your options. And there's quite a few of them, and you don't necessarily have to pass all of them. In fact, OpenAI is really good. Oh, look, deprecated. Required. I think these are the only two that are required on this. So if we go back to the script, and let's just move this out of the way for a moment. Let's bring this over. The way that this script is designed, let me get Margaret out of the way. Sorry, Margaret.
Oh, being
The way
returned
that
to.
this script was essentially designed is that you could call it from different places and pass your parameters via JSON. So that's why the model and the content, they're looking for a parameter. But my thought was, you know what, you might not have a parameter. And so
Hmm.
that's where these defaults come from. So you could come over here and go, oh, well, Kristian didn't use deprecated log probs. I don't even know what that is. And you could add that over here. And then if you add it up here, the JSON gets put together in this data right here. So we've got our model, message, messages. So the text here needs to match what you see over here. So you'll notice that if we scroll up, model, lowercase, model, lowercase. Then over here, I can put the model that I want. So if you want to add something, you would add it up above here, and then you would add it in here. You do need to have some familiarity with JSON. The other thing that OpenAI does, though, that's great is here's an example for you to look at. And, oops. Oh, that was going to make it bigger. Is it just because my screen is tiny? Oh, I can just scroll there. There we go. So they'll show you an example of what this is supposed to look like. So when I was new at JSON, a lot of times I would just go in the data viewer, look at examples, and try to get them to match. And that's how I kind of just learned in the beginning. And then it shows you an example of what that response is going to look like. If we jump back over to FileMaker for a second, I'm just going to hide this. So again, everything configurable should mostly happen here, and then a little bit in our data there. So then it's going to call this script over here, which if you're on PSOS, it will call PSOS. This file is local, so it's going to run locally. And all of the calls that I do go through this script. So if you wanted to, let's go back to the documentation for a moment. If you wanted to add vectors. So if you wanted to create an assistant as an example, and you would come in here and look at this create example, I would suggest you take this script and duplicate it, change this part up here, take a look at the data, and then call the same script. That script receives all of those parameters and should be able to make all of those calls, and then it will return a response to you, and I have a generic response script. So if you go look at that, we're going to call script 03. Everything, oops, I think 01 or 02. All of the calls go out through this. So it receives, you don't even need to necessarily know how this works a whole lot, honestly. And then it's going to go get the API key, some base stuff, make sure you're not missing stuff. And then it's going to put a request together. And then I use a script from a product called Generator that Todd Geist wrote. It's I mean, it's been out for a long time now, and I love doing all my APIs through this. Happy to give credit where credit is due. This thing has made calling APIs really easy for me. Sometimes I will practice in Postman beforehand, and then that returns a generic response, and it creates a log. And I do want to show you guys the log. And then the generic one is mostly pretty basic. Oh, that's right. I got rid of the complicated stuff that was in here. So it gets the response. It deciphers whether there was an issue or not, puts them into the right places, and returns something. So we go back over here. So we form our request. Well, we form our data. This script's going to do the request and the API call. And then this one's going to deal with the result and give us a response on whether or not there was an error. So for example, if I come over here and I go to the menu and I delete this, see if my thing will break. It should. Are you out there? See that? So it's going to return that error for you. So it's really going to try to hold your hand a little bit. Yet again, I went way off the rails. I forget what the question even was. Other questions
we were just talking about for different models. So we do have some questions from Enkelburn73. Can you have it refer to a custom GPT if it is created in OpenAI, i.e. a company user manual? So
oh, like if can it query a user manual to get information out of it?
yeah.
Yes. Did I understand that correctly?
I think so. I think they're also talking about like making their own agenics. Like if you make your own agenic,
So
one
here's the steps that you would need to do. Because this is very, if I'm understanding your question, this is what my client did, but in a different way. You need to create, you don't have to create an assistant, but I would recommend it. It makes your life easier. So you create an assistant, and we can log into the dashboard if we have time, and I'll show you guys how to do that without using FileMaker. But you can do all this with FileMaker and manage it all in there. But you need to create an assistant, and that assistant needs to have a tool. So you've got tools and tool resources, and it needs to have this file search tool. So these are those three tools I mentioned. Code interpreter, it can write code, super cool. It can file search, query data, and then function calls like go get me the weather. So you would create the, actually, let me back up slightly on that. You could create the agent and modify it afterwards, but you would also need to create a vector store. So if we scroll down here, we've got agent, thread, running, streaming. Where is it? Threads, runs. I thought it's right here. Did I scroll past? There we go, vector store. So you need to create a vector store. Think of this like a parent record. And then inside of that vector store, you're going to need to upload information. So let's see if we can't do this really quickly. Oh, I'm logged in. Cool. And then let's go to the dashboard. So I'm going to go over here. I'm just going to make an assistant for fun.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in the assistants. I'm going to go ahead and create one. We're going to call it live stream. Oh, it did. Oh, that's right. I made this earlier before the stream. It's just going to get added to FileMaker. I'm going to delete this one. You come over here, you can, you give it a name. Whoops, you give it a name, you give it some system instructions. You can choose your model over here. So you can see there's a whole lot of those. And then you can turn on your different tools. Um, a lot of detail there. But what you want is to go over to storage, and then you need to create a vector store. So I'm going kind of fast here, but we're going to go ahead and create a vector store. So this would be, what did he say it was? Manuals.
Yes.
So you go ahead and create that. And then you'd go into files and you would upload files into that vector store. On the vector store itself, untitled store, I thought I called it manuals. That's weird. You can come into here and you can click add files. And now you can drag and drop a whole bunch of them at once or click upload. One caveat on that, if you're doing individual files, I did find that if you did too many at once, some of them would start to fail. But he had mentioned that it was a GPT manual. That's something I feel like I'm missing a part to it. Once you have that vector store and the files uploaded, it will index them. And then under the assistant over here, you go in and say, hey, you're a file search. And then you can, I haven't actually done it from here. Select vector store. Oh, so now I would put the ID in. I've done all this part from FileMaker. The only part I didn't do from FileMaker because it would have taken us a bunch of time. Oh, let's get the ID. Perfect. So now it knows that that's what it looks at. The only thing I didn't do in FileMaker, and I told my client we can, which take time, is uploading the files here. So this screen right here would require a bit of JavaScript or some Python or something to get you to actually upload these. So my client and I agreed it's already in here for what he used. We didn't need to reinvent it. Does that answer that person's question? I feel like I might have been slightly off. And also, I know I moved quick, but now you guys can, like, we just made an assistant. We just made a vector store. We tied that vector store to that assistant. The only thing I didn't do is upload files for it to actually query, but then it will look at those and query through them. And then you do need to do training. So the first time I turned the assistant on, its job was tech support. And I'd ask this thing questions and it was go, that's a great question. The great people at company X, they could probably answer that for you. And I was like, no, that's your job.
Yeah,
You're
you
not
need to
sending
answer
them.
for me.
And I was blown away myself after just a little bit of training. It actually started to answer the questions almost identical to the way that they had previously.
So what do you mean by training? How do you train it?
So in that situation, I said no, and I said, here, we asked you this question, and I actually would refer back to the documents we upload. I said, don't you remember on April 3rd, this person asked you this question and this was how it was answered? And then I would be like, hey, I got another question for you. Why don't you try to model it after? And I would refer to the document. And so I gave it examples effectively of what the questions and the answers should look like. And then you can also tell basically good job or bad job. The other thing that you can do is when you create an assistant, let's go to the playground here for a second. So this is a lot like what I have over here in terms of the chat completion, but you can tie it to a model or an agent. Uh, thought I can select my agent. I'm going to just tell you guys more about it. So you've got you create these threads and these conversations. So one of the things that you can do is create a training thread. And so you can be like, hey, here was a question, here was an answer, here's a question, here's an answer. And then when someone calls up, or you can just run it. So here's the thing, when you upload a conversation thread, you indicate the role of the message. Was this from the AI or is this from the user? When you upload a thread, if it already has messages in, the AI effectively reads that as, this is what I said before. So you can actually tell it, hey, in the past you did this. And then it will try to mimic those answers that it did before. One of the best things you can do is say, hey, you had a question like this, and this is how you answered it. It was really good. The other thing that we've done for my client is we've given them the ability for users to respond to the answers and kind of give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. That way we can go back and we can find the answers that were poor and maybe fine tune it a little bit from them. What I haven't gotten into on this is there is a section in here on fine tuning. I'm not sure if I'm going to find it right now, but I don't want to speak too much to it because I haven't fully gone through this yet. But from what I can tell so far, the main thing I've done for training is just using it and giving examples of good answers versus bad answers. Is that helpful?
Yes, I think so. We have more questions.
Oh, good.
Uh, can you
So I got other
switch?
things to show, but I'm glad. Continue.
Can you ask it questions about data within FileMaker? Yeah, I think that would be a case where you take your data and upload it to an assistant, right? If I'm understanding
So
correctly.
what they showed us at Engage last year, I was gonna do this with my client, but let me give you two examples, and then there's a big
Hmm.
caveat. Or caveat's not the right word, but FileMaker has given us an ability to upload schema. And the schema is really important because it needs to understand your data model if you're going to ask it about things out of FileMaker. So there's that. And for my client, we ultimately didn't need to do that. Screenshots of the layouts were more effective than understanding the schema. They've given us access to that, and that's really cool. I forget the function off the top of my head. If you guys reach us to support, we can find it for you. Um, the second thing is you can upload your data and then it can use that data, but you got to be really cautious about this. When a client asks me about AI, the very first question involves their data. So OpenAI is awesome in that it's really well built, easy to interface with. It's great in a lot of ways, except for two things. Number one, there's a cost to use. Number two, when your data goes in there, you don't have control over the privacy and security of it. And so I would never upload personal data into one of these models. I have another client, they want to use an AI model so that they want to be able to have their sales team effectively query all the information that's in their database about their products. They've accumulated so much information over the decades that they have a competitive edge over their competitors,
Hmm.
and they want to have their sales team have access to that. But they absolutely do not want that going into a data model because then they're giving away their trade secrets. And
Yeah,
so
they're
instead,
surrendering that same edge. Yeah.
we're going to set up a local model. The local model has the benefit that you do not pay for use with some caveats. And your data is secured and used by you. In fact, it doesn't even need the internet. It can run locally. The biggest downside with using it locally is the upfront cost of getting the hardware to run these things. And then the fact that the setup may not be as seamless and smooth as some of the online cloud-based ones are. So depending on what data you're going to upload out of FileMaker, the answer is yes, you can, and you should give it context. But I'd be very cautious to like upload your customers table. I would not do that, frankly.
Shigel says, if you set up a company account, OpenAI does not store your data by default, FYI. They tell you that. I don't know if I believe it.
I just wouldn't trust it.
I don't believe it. Like,
Yeah.
sorry.
There have
That
been
makes
things
me
now where
sound
there's
like
a
a
toggle
paranoid
switch that
wreck.
says your data
But
is secure, but almost everyone that talks about this is like, I don't know that they can fully promise that. And again, I am not the smartest person on this, and I don't want to pretend to be, but people who are smarter and more experienced than me say do not upload personal data into these models. Just don't do it.
yeah, don't give them the opportunity. Like, they might be good people not doing that, but they also might be
Well, and
lying.
it's whether they're malicious or not, it's that your
Yeah.
data then gets, because like
Yeah.
in the same way we're training our specific agent slash model, the greater model of GPT 4.0 and these minis are getting trained off of the experience that's going on. Um, I would venture to guess, and I don't think I'm totally in the weeds here. Part of the reason that these services are available the way they are right now, because they're losing money, is because they need us to use them to train these models. ChatGPT is not making money with us using these services as of right now, as far as I know. But they want us to make these models smarter and smarter. And so that means when your data goes in, your questions go in, it's being stored or used in
Some
some
way.
way.
Yeah. No thanks.
But I have heard there's a checkbox recently added that's supposed to secure it. So Buyer beware. It's up to you to choose to do what you want to do with your information. But yeah, if you wanted to query the information in FileMaker, it's totally available, and you should take advantage of those things to get better answers. Other questions?
Can you switch the model for each question?
Technically, you can. In fact, if we go back over to this, again, I don't have it set up in this demo, but if we go back to our agent, oh, I gotta go back to the dashboard. So I can come over here. I made this agent earlier. Assistant. Why am I not seeing? There we go. So I can come over here and I can change it from GPT 4.0 to, look at that. They upgraded from 4.0 to 4.1. So, and I'd have to double check if we go back to the documentation. On the file that I'm using, you're actually telling it the model on every question. So you absolutely could change everyone. In fact, you could add a field on the screen right here called model and just change it, and that could be your parameter that you pass. In terms of having a thread, which is the more complicated option, when you make a question, let's go here, not fine-tuning. Oh, vector stores, assistance, thread. Create thread, runs. Create run. So when you do a run, so you need to have an agent, you need to have a thread. A thread is like a conversation, the agent is the other end, and then the run is the process of sending the messages and getting the response. And when you do that, I think I showed you guys very briefly that the agent can have a description and instructions. You can actually pass additional instructions. Now, in this case, you are referring to the assistant, and that's where it's going to get its model from. So you'd have to change the model. So in the not my add-on, you'd have to change the agent or use different agents. But in this file over here, I mean, you could literally go onto this card window. I don't have it open right now outside of it, and you could add that field and just pass it as a parameter. You could also do, if it's easy, have one button down here that says GPT 4.0 and another one that says mini, and depending on which one you call, you pass a different parameter. I think that answers that question.
Uh, does it understand a DDR for context? Question mark.
I haven't tried to upload. So when you send the schema via the FileMaker script, it's kind of sending, I want to say, a version-ish of a DDR. It's either like SQL a structure or a DDR. I did, as some of you have seen know about me, I can go into the layouts and the scripts and I can pull the XML out. And I mentioned earlier in this conversation that I did that for the client. And while the model was able to read it, the response we got from my client's specific need, it didn't improve the answer. So yes, you could, but it may not give you the results that you're looking for. The thing with these is you got to experiment a little bit. But you can try uploading that. Now now let me show you one other thing if I can find it quickly. No promises I will find this quickly. But over here under the vector store spot, vector store files, scroll to the bottom. Nope. Oops. I may not find this. There is a spot in here that tells you all of the supported file types. And I'm trying to find that for you guys to, I mean, I believe, I'm almost positive XML is one of them, and I think HTML is, which means you should be able to actually upload a DDR and have it query it. I just don't know that that would actually give you a useful response. Vector store object. Vector store. I may not find the spot in here that shows you all of them. That's mostly just because I'm on the spot trying to think of it really quickly off the top of my head, but it is in here. It's a giant list. PDFs are one. What was surprising to me is there was one file type that I would have expected to work was not available. Create a vector store, list vector store files. Don't see the link for it. It might actually even be in one of these. I think I was already on this one. Oh, there we go. It was the bottom of that. So plus C, CPP, CS, CSS, docx, HTML, Java, JS. I mean, you can see there's a whole bunch, but not Excel. That was the one that I was kind of surprised that Excel is not an option. You know what I don't see? I don't see XML. So you might not be, so you can do a DDR as HTML though. I'm carrying on. Yes, technically I think you could. I just don't know if you'd get the results that you're looking for. You'd have to test it. Real quick, before we do some questions, Margaret, I want to show the last thing that's in
Oh,
here.
yeah, sorry, we just been going.
Oh, no. That's actually great. Again, I didn't have a lot of material, and so I'm more than happy to dive into the questions because, like I said at the beginning, there's so many rabbit holes to dive in on this, and I think it's quite fascinating. The last thing I wanted to show you guys is, this thing does the chat completion. It shows you some of the basics on how to use the API, but there's one other Easter egg in here, or bonus. If you go to the menu and you go to log, this is something I have been using with a handful of clients now that I've been improving and tinkering with. This is not the finished form by any means, but every time one of those API calls is made, a log gets created. And so it tells me the endpoint of what it's trying to do, whether it was successful, whether it failed, some basic audit log information up here, including if there was an error. But the thing that I am quite tickled by, at least, is if you come over here, when I call these, I need to pass some parameters. And so now I can see the parameter JSON. And so if you're not super familiar with JSON, this really quite holds your hand. In fact, if I click on it, you'll notice that it'll keep showing me further and further down what's inside of there. And if I go in here, I can actually delete backwards on these keys and go backwards. In fact, if I delete all of this, instead of seeing my parameters, I can see the request that was made to OpenAI. So this is the request we sent out with our code that we'll have to scrub from the video. Oh, there it is. I can't get rid of it. So we'll get rid of our request. And then we'll go to the response, which shouldn't have our API key. And then, so then here's our response that comes out of it. In fact, you can see this was the message one. There's the answer to Margaret's question, along with a whole bunch of other information. So this is built in to it. And I wanted to just show it because ChatGPT aside or whatnot, some of you are a little bit more experienced, may take some of the things from this audit log, and that'd be awesome. Just come back and tell us what you do with it if you do. But Margaret, I want to hear what other questions you have before we gotta wrap up.
A question more about add-ons. Does FM Starting Point have a layout for these scripts? What do you access to the scripts manager?
The add-on scripts.
Yeah.
So when you install an add-on, it will basically just put the scripts at the bottom of the script workspace. What I do to kind of keep things nice and organized is I always put my scripts in a folder. So here's all the ones for ChatGPT. And in fact, what I even just started doing is putting the breakers around it so it's really easy to see. Same thing with the layout manager. So if we close all this up, you'll notice that I have a spot down here for ChatGPT that has all of those layouts. The only place I can't add this right now is in the custom functions manager. I usually put a prefix on them, so they're all sorted next to each other. I didn't do it on this one for a reason. I'm just not sure if I'm allowed to share that reason. Was that helpful? Other questions?
I think that was a helpful. I'm thinking and getting yeah, okay. So yeah, no, if you've never used add-ons before, the concept can be like, yo, what? But it just gets
And if you're new to add-ons for that, go back. We got a ton of videos. I even have videos. I'll show you how to make them.
Yes.
And so I there's already a lot of resources on that. Highly recommend going back and checking those out. Richard had me come in and start with some really small baby steps so that people could really, you can gauge it at your own level.
Yeah. Someone mentions that they use Gemini to scan invoices and create invoices, accounts payable automatically.
If it's like the OCR, that is one of the coolest things that's out there. Nick did a demo on this a while ago, and I'm going to guess what that person is. They take the invoice, scan the PDF, it reads the PDF, gives you JSON, imports it. This was impossible really to do before for AI. That's That's one of the things I have a client that wants to do. I have another client who has a bunch of PDF manuals in their database, and instead of searching by manual, they want to just ask a question and have it show them the answer and then what manual they would look at. And I've got the other client that wants to query data outside of their database for their sales department. That one would probably be a local model, whereas most of these other ones we would use something like ChatGPT as long as the costs are efficient. But there's a lot of models out there. If you're new to it, again, the people who are smarter and more experienced than me, they all agree. Go to one of these cloud ones, learn how to use that, and then don't be afraid to go and experiment with one of the local ones. And Claris is really invested in this technology, and they have a lot of things in the pipeline to start to improve and make this easier. A lot of the stuff I made for my client that's not available on this demo. The newer versions of FileMaker may make some of those steps a lot easier to configure.
Yeah, people saying, yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you. So
Good.
cool.
So drag and drop it on, go set up your key, and you're ready to rock and roll with basic stuff. And then if you want to go further than that, of course, shameless plug, you can always reach out to us. It doesn't even have to be me. Our engineers could help you to take that a little bit further. But at least for those of you who want to tinker, this should give you something to experiment, see what it is. And, if one of you guys makes something really cool, come back and tell us about it. I always love hearing how you guys take the things that we make and make it better. A lot of my stuff is built on the shoulders of other people too. And I always like to make sure I give credit. I love the fact that Todd Geis has that API script, which another engineer at RCC tweaked a little bit, and I've started using that. I borrowed some of our audit logs to build onto my audit log. So, these are all collaborative things. I know Stuart, I think you said, was out there at Twitch today. Nick did something, Calvin made something cool, and then Stuart made an add-on. I'm still using that add-on. So thank you, Stuart.
There you go. No, this is awesome. Seriously, this has been awesome.
Good. I'm glad,
Kristian,
since I thought I had 5 minutes out of an hour to do.
well, I think getting in depth into like what is it, how was it, like how do you go make assistants, talking about what to do with it, because a lot of people are like, oh, add AI, but like how actually? And I think you did a really good job with this.
I think the use cases has been the biggest challenge for me. It's like,
Yes.
this is really cool, but what do I do with it? Like,
Yes.
like the invoices is a perfect example of that
Mhm.
one.
Absolutely.
I
Okay.
wonder if the Gemini person, is that one of the ones used locally? I can't remember off the top of my head. I think Claude is one of the big ones.
Don't remember. I need to go like actually research.
I think it might be, but I'm not positive. There's a lot of online services, but some of them can be really expensive. Another engineer at RCC knew one. I showed it to my client, and in their specific use case, which was enormous amounts of documents, as cool as the tool was, unfortunately for them, it exceeded their budget. So you got to figure out what matches you the best. And if you don't know, reach out to somebody who can guide that. Obviously, RCC is one of those resources, but there's some other great ones out there too. If any of you have access to the videos from the last Engage, there's numerous great videos on these AI models. Again, from people who are probably far more experienced on this than I am, but I think we're all learning together as a community since this stuff's so new.
It's so fresh. We're all kind of mostly new to it, which is kind of awesome in some respects. So, thank you very much, Kristian. Thank you everyone for coming. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
No.